My name is Isabelle McConville. I am a bookseller and associate producer here at Barnes & Noble, and I am so excited to be here with the fan favorite two-time Survivor contestant, Stephen Fishbach. Stephen, thank you so much for being here.
Isabelle, it's such an honor to be here. And as I was just saying to you before we started recording, I'm so excited to be participating in a Barnes & Noble podcast. So many of my formative reading experiences were in my local Barnes & Noble in Los Angeles on the 3rd Street Promenade and then on the Grove. And so to actually be talking to an official Barnes & Noble account is just mind-boggling for me.
We're very, very excited to have you here. I love hearing that. I also grew up going to, my local Barnes & Noble stores. And there's just something about being surrounded by books and finding just the right book for you. And we're going to be able to do that now with your debut novel, Escape. How do you feel seeing this in my hand?
It's wild. I mean, I've been working on this for a decade. Like, I wrote a draft, then I went back to school because I thought it wasn't a good enough draft, and I rewrote it, and then I rewrote it again. And so actually the fact that it's like it now exists is just, thrilling and terrifying.
So this is obviously, like we said, your debut novel. You've been keeping very busy since your time on Survivor. Can you tell me a little bit about what your life looks like right now and what it was like to write this book?
Yeah, I mean, well, the primary facet of my life is that I have a wife and 2 small children, under, one of whom is 5 and one is 2. So most of my energy just goes to playing and engaging them, which is, wonderful and joyful. But I did, and I still podcast about Survivor. For years, I blogged about Survivor. I went into Survivor like being worried that I was going to become the Survivor guy, and that in fact did happen. That was what happened to me. But I also wrote this novel, as you say, and so I tried to carve out time every day where I could write, a couple good hours in the morning, and I felt like if I got 2 hours in the morning before the sort of day's chaos hit me, I felt like every day I was making forward progress.
That makes sense. I'm always interested in hearing about that process because it sounds like you just have to have so much discipline to really write something. I mean, I've dabbled with short stories and things like that in the past, but having the discipline of writing a book and also, like you said, having 2 small kids, I mean, the last few years must have been a whirlwind for you.
It's been chaotic. It has definitely been, it's been a wonderful chaos. Like I said, it's joyful chaos.
Yeah.
But yeah, creating that space was sometimes very hard because there's so many demands on your time. But I did feel like if I was going to pursue this, if I actually wanted to get a book out into the world, I needed to create that sort of rigid structure, and having that kind of rule for myself, like I have to be there at this time in the morning at my desk working. It made some of the challenging questions kind of like, it sort of like simplified some of the challenging questions.
That makes sense. Yeah, and you did the thing. You really did do the thing. I have a very early copy of Escape. It's still a bound manuscript.
Oh wow, they penciled in the title on the spine. I just saw the hard copies, the final copies, and
nice.
Like I'd seen the galleys before, and they look rad. Like they're kind of like glossy.
Oh,
like
they're
shine.
glossy.
Yeah, it's really neat. They did a really cool job with it. So I as excited as I was to see them, I was surprised and delighted even beyond.
Oh yeah, and it's such a great package. That looks beautiful. I'm excited to get my own in the mail soon. But anyway, can you please set up the story of your novel for us? Let's really dig into what this story is.
Yes. So Escape follows a has-been reality TV contestant, Kent Duvall, who, over a decade ago, won the first season he was on this show, which in my mind is sort of like this combination of like Naked and Afraid and Survivor and some of these like survivalist shows. And his life has kind of drifted and, coming back into the real world from the highs of being, a reality TV champion, you just never can capture that same euphoria. And he's like desperate to reclaim what he imagines is his identity. It's kind of this like last gasp of a middle-aged man, trying to be his like manly self. And then he gets the opportunity to go on this new show called Escape, and he sort of blows up his life as a way of like enabling himself to pursue this new opportunity. And then there is this reality TV producer, Beck Berman, who is, coming off of a tragedy of her own. And she also is going to be a producer on this show. So the story kind of tracks these characters as they, both, come into conflict about who really controls the story. Is it the contestants? Is it the producers? Is it the island itself? And just like the chaos all around them.
I also want to start by talking about the genesis of the story. Really, I can see you have the one story framed right next to you. So this started off as a short story, which won you the Pushcart Prize, which is so cool. Can you talk to me about how that came to be and really where this story started?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that section, it was almost really an experiment. I had been, I was getting my MFA through NYU, and I just kind of wanted to put into practice some of the lessons I was learning. I hadn't really written short stories before. I'd always wanted to write novels. And I just had this vision from many of my own experiences going to these reality TV charity events, which are real things where, former reality TV stars congregate, allegedly to raise money for charity, but really just to like get to feel famous again for a couple of days while like the reality TV fans kind of mingle with them. And I like just that kind of like that world, which I'd never seen depicted before. I kind of wanted to capture that world. And at first I wasn't sure who the sort of like entryway character was. Was it like this young guy coming into it new and fresh, and he's being shown the ropes by all the seasoned, the seasoned people? And then I kind of settled on this like old has-been, because I realized that person could give us kind of like the most perspective and insight into this. And he thinks he's above it all, but he's definitely not above it all. And once I had captured that perspective, my teacher, John Freeman, said, this belongs in a book. Like, this needs, you need to flesh this out. This needs to be bigger than just the story.
So did you always know you wanted to eventually write a book, or did this kind of just reveal itself to you? I know you said you're working on your MFA, so did you always know you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
I mean, since I was a kid in Barnes & Noble, reading mostly like, stories about vampires or whatever. I always wanted to write a book. I really did not think of myself writing a book about reality television. And it was only really a couple of years ago, I mean, really through this story, that I sort of realized I had sort of access to the world, to this unique world that I'd never really seen depicted in fiction before in a way that felt true to me. I think like reality TV sometimes has taken on this like cultural meaning as this truly trashy, disposable, ridiculous product, which it kind of is sometimes. But also like at its heart, there's also these people, who are earnest and hardworking and desperately seeking their own kind of redemption. And I thought the conflict between those two things, like that sort of inherent ridiculousness of the reality TV enterprise and that sort of like deep soul searching that comes from the people who are involved in it is really like had an interesting tension.
Yeah, and I think you're completely right. There's just something about these people that we can't look away from, no matter what, culture and society tells us about who these people are on our television screens. We can't seem to stop watching them. So I think you're right. There was an untapped well that I think is at the heart of this story.
Oh, and I think some of that is just, people are cast to be these archetypes. And of course, you sort of inherently resist that. Like, oh no, I'm a complex human. But then when you're there, you find yourself like becoming that archetype. You find yourself like performing this identity that's been placed on you. And I think that's like so interesting. I think that's so part of what's so appealing about it is we can see these shows and we see the archetypes, and like the little person inside of it kind of like peeks out every now and then.
And obviously, like we've said, Survivor is a huge part of our culture, and you're a fan favorite contestant.
Okay.
But this story, it really has legs of its own to stand on. It was such a great book. It was so tightly well written. What was it like to really mine your own personal experiences to an extent to write this book? Did you like learn anything about yourself in the process?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, first of all, thank you. That's so kind. That's so kind of you to say. Yeah, I wanted this to be. I didn't want this to be about Survivor,
Right.
for two reasons. First of all, like Survivor was an incredible experience for me. And I didn't want to like be seen as like taking it down a peg.
Right.
And second of all, like I wanted to, kind of make a point that was beyond just this one show about this whole industry and this whole world. So I tried to channel what I knew to be the feelings so many of the like of myself and so many of the contestants I've met and so many of the producers I've met without, just like locking it into this one structure or format. And that's a great question. Like, did I learn anything about myself? What was interesting, I guess, was to see, so many different like parts of myself surface through the writing of this. Like I really had to draw on what I feel like are my past lives. I was a TV executive for a while. I worked for a reality TV producers trade group. And it was just like kind of interesting as I was writing different characters to kind of like channel different aspects of my existence that I really don't think about that much anymore in my day-to-day life.
That's so interesting because by writing this book, and like you said, you've also had experience on the other side of the camera as well, but you're almost like another producer of this book in a way, of the show. What was it like to kind of be on that side of things as you wrote?
Yeah, the plotting is very tricky. I mean, it really is interesting because I do think there's enormous parallels between being a writer and being a reality TV producer.
Yeah.
What I think is cool about reality TV producers is like they are trying to create a 3-act structured story out of real people. Like that is so interesting. That's just like tension between like, before a reality TV show starts, there's a story Bible. And I have one of those in my book where like they lay out what is supposed to happen episode by episode. What is supposed to happen is plotted in advance before you ever step foot on the island. And yet, obviously, there's real people. They're making their own decisions. They're like making their own choices. And so that kind of like tension between order and chaos is very much what I feel like being a writer is about. Cause like, I'm a plotter. Like I had my beautiful 3-act structure, but then as you're writing, like the characters resist that, they want to go their own way. And I was like, no. And so like just that both allowing them to go their own way, but also like keeping that structured plot moving along was very challenging. And it did give me like more empathy for what reality TV producers struggle with.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you brought up the story, the show Bible, because I dog-eared yours in my copy. Don't tell anyone.
Yeah.
But can you tell me a little bit about actually creating this and writing this and what it was like to write your own show Bible?
Yeah. So I've actually done this professionally, like written Bibles for other shows, and they'll, tell me who the casts are. And then so I like write it up like, and then this will happen. You kind of like blue skying sort of like what like crazy conflicts might emerge. And honestly, I added that scene sort of like late in the writing process because I was hearing from readers that they needed like more of a sense of what my show was. And then I was like, oh, well, I actually have a lot of experience doing this kind of thing myself. And I thought it was kind of funny to create a show Bible using these characters who by now I knew really well. And plot points that I knew some of them would happen and some wouldn't. And have this sense of, how much are the producers scripting this in advance and how much are they making happen versus how much are they letting things develop organically. But honestly, it was very fun. Like to me, like a lot of the fun of the book is just sort of that like manipulative element where these producers are kind of like trying to push you into this preset story. So like writing it up was really enjoyable.
Yeah, I can only imagine that it has to feel so cool to first be able to plot your own story, but then also to plot your own TV show and just how did you keep yourself organized in the process actually?
It was very, very, I had a lot of like story structure documents. And then of course, wait, which story structure document is the most recent one? Like what happens in Act 2 here? And having these two kind of, one of the biggest challenges of the book was that, on the one hand, I have this it's sort of an upstairs, downstairs world where on the one hand, you have the whole world of the producers and their kind of dramas. And on the other hand, you have the world of the contestants and their dramas. And the two intersect with each other. And, the producers are manipulating the contestants and the contestants are feeding back in the producers. And I wanted everyone to feel like they had a story arc because so much of the book is about story arcs. And I wanted everyone to kind of like feel like there was a real that intersected at key points. And so plotting that out was like so far beyond my capacity when I started, which is why it's taken me so long to do. Like I had to learn how to plot a book in order to write this book.
I also really wanted to ask you about the epigraph at the start of the book. We have a great quote from Kurt Vonnegut from Mother Night. I'm going to read it out to you. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful what we pretend to be. Can you tell me about knowing that this was what you wanted for the start of the book and what it means to you for the story?
Oh, that's a great question. So much of this book is about people getting lost in their performance of their identities.
Right.
And that is, on the one hand, a reality contestant, Kent, for example, who wants to be the alpha male and, just keeps pushing himself harder and harder to live up to this sort of, quite antiquated idea of what masculinity is. But it's not just the reality contestants, right? I mean, Beck has this idea of what it means to be a producer. And she too just keeps chasing that vision of herself. And that quote and that idea, to me, are just really kind of at the heart of what we're living through right now as a society, where we all are creating these identities for ourselves. We're performing our identities on social media, our Instagram posts. I mean, even like LinkedIn, you're sort of trying to craft an identity for yourself. And then as soon as you craft it, you keep on having to like live up to that. And like, how can I live up to this like vision of who I want myself to be? And often pursuing that vision at the expense of, your own very real life in front of you has a hugely negative impact.
Yeah, and you're making me think a lot about, a few years ago, before I had this job, applying to other jobs and just feeling like I was performing for every person that I did an interview with. And so it's, whether we want to admit it or not, I guess we can all kind of relate to reality show contestants in a way.
I think so too. And I think it's not just like us performing. It's like society wants you to perform. We're all so overwhelmed with information and decisions that we just like, for most of the people in your life, you can't digest them as complex people. You're like, what's my snapshot vision of you? And it's reductive. Of course, it's reductive. But so then like, how do we work? How do we intersect as human beings when that's constantly happening to us?
Oh, yeah. And I'd love to start digging into the characters as well. Right off the bat, we have Kent, like we said, a washed-up reality star scrambling to find some meaning in his life. It felt like he kept making all of the wrong decisions. And I was, at times, rooting for him. And I was like, Kent, please, just follow your heart. Do what you know is right. And he just wouldn't listen to me. But can you please talk about creating his character and how he really came alive for you in the book? And also, did you always know that you wanted to start with him?
No, initially my book was almost entirely told from the producer's perspective, Beck's perspective.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So Kent really kind of came into it late and then sort of took over. And you might think like, he's a 44-year-old has-been reality contestant. I'm a 46-year-old has-been reality TV contestant. No, but there's no overlap. I don't see the parallel. 46, 44. He's a winner. I never won my show. So there's no real parallels between the two of us. But I've just seen a lot of it. I've seen a lot of people, get lost in this world and their identities. And I kind of wanted to like honor that and also like trace the sort of inherent ludicrousness of it. The characters who I'm most excited about are the ones who are constantly facing this decision between, what they know is right and what their like immediate desires are.
Yeah.
And that tension is really fun. And also can, I think, be really funny when they just like constantly mess it up, even as you are sort of just like begging them to get it together. And, I really worked hard to get like the pathos of Kent while also kind of maintaining a lot of his ridiculousness. So thank you very much.
Yeah, those are always my favorite kinds of characters to read, where I'm just truly throwing my book at the wall and just like stressed out about my personal friend Kent and the decisions that he's making. Because we're talking about these fictional characters like they're real people. I mean, that is such a feat in itself.
Well, yeah, thank you. I mean, like, it's really like I did try to like channel, I worked really hard and channeled like a lot of, people I know basically into these characters. So that's really kind.
I was also so interested in the perspective shifts we get in the book. I just love when, authors play around with structure. Different chapters focus on different characters, and you even write Beck's chapters in the first person perspective and Kent's in third. Can you please talk to me a bit about making that decision and what it was like to kind of turn your brain on and off in different ways like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've got like 3 levels of answer to that. I mean, the first level, like I feel like sounds the smartest, is the idea that like Beck is a character who is constantly shaping stories, right? That's her job as a producer. So I thought like first person past tense, she's constantly like taking the threads of the things she's experienced and like trying to like explain them and rationalize them and narrate them. Whereas Kent is a reality contestant who just lives in this eternal present tense. You know, even when you're on a reality show, the producers are telling you to speak, you know, in the present tense. Like, say these things that happened last week are happening now, because that's what's exciting. And if you ever watch a reality TV show, you'll see all the confessionals are present tense, you know. And so I'm walking through the hallways when I see Rob, and Rob is wearing a sweater, you know. That wouldn't be a great confessional, but, but you see that it's in present tense. So like capturing those two kind of like mentalities, I just thought that tense would help it. I mean, the second answer is that like I kind of wanted to more clearly distinguish them. So when you were reading, you just instantaneously knew whose perspective you were in. Like, am I in Kent, or am I in a contestant's perspective, or am I in the producer's perspective? And the real reason is that that's just how I wrote them. Like that's just how it came out. And then I've you know, after the fact, I've justified why it was a good choice.
I'm glad you did it. I think it makes the book so much more interesting. And also, did you find that you favored one voice over another? Did you like writing in, you know, first person or third person more than the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, like like I said, I started the book in first person. I don't know if I'll ever write another book in first person.
No?
Because like it's so hard to communicate emotion, you know?
Yeah.
With third person, you'd be like, he was mad. But with first person, like someone's not gonna say, I'm mad. You know, you have to like sort of like, it has to be like ironized. It has to be like expressed through, you know, some other way, like some like metaphor or some like projection onto the world around you. It's really challenging. I also just found like Kent's perspective, like I think because I just took so much joy in writing this has-been reality contestant, you know, it felt like I was like pouring so much of my angst into this character. I really like it, just had more fun writing Kent.
And let's talk a little bit more about Beck too. We meet her in a very bizarre situation at first, and then she's swept away into the crew of this show. Can you please talk to me about creating her character and what it was like to write her perspective on the production side of things?
What I found really interesting about Beck is that she is someone who is like, who truly believes she is doing like good things, right? She believes she is like making good choices for the good of other people around her. But hopefully, like through the irony of the book, like you can see, like that is not true. Like her choices are not always good. And so I thought like that what I really enjoyed about Beck was creating this tension between her rationalizing and justifying these choices she were making. So hopefully you feel like she is, you know, you empathize with her, but also seeing like how she kind of leads herself astray to making choices that are quite destructive.
Yeah, and she truly, like you said, she thinks that she is making the right decisions. She finds that she has a kinship with one of the contestants, Miriam, and she almost sees herself in Miriam, and she has this very almost strange attachment to her. Can you talk a little bit about writing that part and what that meant for Beck?
Yeah, I mean, just speaking with a lot of reality producers, I started to see how they often will project themselves onto a contestant. And what's interesting about that is it's really more about them than about the contestant, right? And so I liked this idea that a producer was kind of trying to insert herself into the story through this contestant that she was trying to like push to be the person she wanted to be and do the things she wanted to do. And that kind of tension between like, there's this person there who's like, that's not who I am. Like, I'm a real person. I have my own vision. And the producer. And what's interesting about that dynamic is that when you're on these shows, the producers are the people who you feel like you can trust the most, right? Everyone else out there is literally out to get you. You know, they're all scheming against you. And so when you're a contestant, you do kind of develop this really rich, intimate bond with the producer. And you do put yourself in their hands. And sometimes they're coaxing you to be your best self. And sometimes they're doing things that are not in your best interest.
So when I was prepping for this interview, I also went back and I dipped into Cue the Sun by Emily Nussbaum. And she has been on the show before. It was a fantastic interview. So if you want to go listen to that, you definitely should. Her book, Cue the Sun, is a deep dive into the history of reality television and also the invention of reality television. And something that really stuck with me that I also saw played out in your book was this other side of production, which is more predatory. There's a bit of a predatory nature when it comes to production for these reality TV shows. And Emily talked about producers continuously asking contestants the same questions over and over to produce the soundbite or the clip that they needed. And we see this happen in your book as well. Can you talk to me about those parts of your book and having Beck struggle with that push and pull and wondering if she's going too far?
Yeah. And that chapter, especially like this one interview chapter that you're referring to, was the hardest chapter for me to write, and the one that I rewrote the most times, because I really wanted to get it right. Because that, I think, is essential to understanding the whole dynamic of being on a reality show and producing the reality show, is these interviews where, on the one hand, producers are asking you about what's just happened.
Right.
And on the other hand, they're guiding you to giving answers that they like. And those answers don't just, those answers end up affecting the contestants' thinking. It's not just like you're saying something for the cameras. You actually start to internalize the things that they're saying. So, if the and you're right, like they will prod you towards things that they want you to do by using a question format. So they can't be, hey, don't you think you should go push over that bookshelf? And you say, no, I don't think I should push over that bookshelf. Like, really? Don't you think if you, really want to be a great guest on this podcast, you should push over that bookshelf? And you start to ultimately have your whole thinking warped, because you think like, wow, I do want to be a great guest on this podcast. I do want to be, I do want to push on that over that bookshelf. And then you go and push over that bookshelf and you're like, you know what? That was the right thing for me. There's the cognitive dissonance of doing that, of doing an action that initially you rejected, and hearing yourself say the words, I want to push over that bookshelf. It's like that sort of like, I mean, not to compare high things with low here, but like, Shakespeare always has these characters who overhear themselves saying something and they realize, oh, wow, that is what I want. And this is sort of like a warped kind of, a warped version of that, where you're pressed to say something and then you say it and then you mistakenly believe that, hey, that is what I want. And that then ends up affecting like how you perceive yourself. I think it's like such an interesting dynamic.
It totally is. And I remember when Emily was on the show, she talked specifically about one of the most iconic lines in reality TV history, I'm not here to make friends.
What I love about that quote in particular, and it's from the very first season of Survivor, it's from Kelly Wigglesworth, is that you can see that it's just not true. Like, she's saying that quote to like prove something to herself. Like, I'm not here to make friends, that she is probably just going along on the friend journey, and the producers want to shake things up. And so they say to her, are you here to make friends or are you here to win $1 million? And she's like, you know what? I'm not here to make friends. I'm not, and then simply by answering that producer's question, she then has the epiphany like, hey, I'm here for $1 million. I'm not here to make friends. And it's interesting, like how that line in particular, you're right, it's like one of the most famous in reality TV, has then been sort of like taken by everybody. It's been on like every single show has a contestant saying, I'm not here to make friends.
Yeah.
And it's like they're trying to prove something to themselves. But it's like what's interesting about that dynamic is it's like there's like a little bit of the person and a little bit of production. It is kind of like, and that was like that syncing that I was trying to get with like the producer projecting herself onto the contestant. Like, it's like there's like a meeting, it's like the two come together and they're less than the sum of their parts.
Right. Something else that continuously comes up in the book is the reminder for the contestants not to talk about production. It's a constant in the background of the novel, and it adds to this feeling of surveillance and of performance. Can you talk to me about including that in the book as well?
Yeah, listen, I think that's just such a part of the texture of every reality contestant's life. And so much of what I was trying to do was just capture that kind of daily texture of what it's really like to be on this show. But you're right. There's, you're surrounded by cameras and boom mics, and there's a drone flying overhead, and like, what a strange world to be a part of, and you're not allowed to reference it. And what's interesting is that over time, like, you really do, the cliche that you kind of learn to, or you stop noticing it is really true. You do stop noticing it. And that's kind of wild too, right? You're on like a deserted beach and like surrounding you are these cameras, and you're like, get out of my way. I got to go talk to this person,
You learn to live in the chaos, I guess.
I guess so, yeah.
I was also so interested by what happens to these people, the contestants, when they lose or they win and they have to re-enter the world now. I mean, we've gone from constant surveillance, from footage of them sleeping to eating to on shows like Love Island, like literally stepping into the shower and stepping out of the shower, all while being judged and watched by millions of people. How do you re-enter the world and keep your head on your shoulders? I mean, first, can you talk to me about what that means for you, and then also what you really wanted to convey through your characters as well?
I'm still working through that. I think if you ask
Okay.
some of my family members, they'd say I haven't yet re-entered the world. It's a real challenge, and that's one of the things that I think the book really tries to wrestle with is the way that you are so shaped by this experience. And then, when you're on this show, you're constantly the hero of your own story.
Yeah.
You're telling yourself, this is the great adventure that I, the hero, am a part of. And when you're eliminated from the show, you realize very suddenly that the story was never about you. You are a side character in someone else's story. And that is a very, very difficult realization.
Yeah, and we see characters struggle with it through your book. Like, obviously, Kent, Kellyanne, Carl, they're all having trouble kind of putting the real world back together with their experiences and finding out who they are outside of the show. And they've all just been through this intense and traumatic at times experience, and their psychologist is acting like he's on vacation in your book, at least. Can you talk to me about writing that scene?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's that's sort of obviously an over the top kind of version of
Right.
What could happen. But, I do think, even the crew doesn't realize it is a trauma, and it
Yeah.
sounds, and that's what I think is so interesting. It's like you're on a reality TV show. It's broadcast on, ABC at 9.
Yeah.
And yet you're going through a real trauma. You're starving. You're being forced to betray the people, like literally lie to their faces. The very people who you're relying on for their body heat, in the cold nights. And that's a real challenging, traumatic human experience. And yet, because it's in the context of this reality show, nobody really it all seems very trivial and frivolous. And I
Yeah.
think that is, it's interesting. And it's also I don't know, how you move beyond that. And I do think a lot of these shows actually, I mean, to get serious, are getting a lot better with aftercare because, now 20 years in to this reality TV experiment, or more than that, people are seeing just how deep an impact
Yeah.
these experiences leave on the contestants.
And do you think that we're living through a kind of reality TV renaissance right now? I wonder what you think, because the last season of Love Island was a huge success. It was the first reality show that I spent real time with myself, and it broke streaming records and immediately thrust new stars into the spotlight just right away. Even before these people were off the show, they were already famous. And so I wonder if you can tell me what you think about that, because also, like I was talking about, Emily Nussbaum's book came out 2 summers ago. Aisling Rao wrote The Compound, a fantastic book following a disoriented contestant on the set of a reality show. And this is all happening now. One of the most popular shows right now is Abbott Elementary, a mockumentary, and it's still currently successful. So, or also, just another example, Traders. Traders is huge right now, and I'm personally going to a Traders live experience in Brooklyn over the weekend, which I'm
That's fun.
so excited to do. And we're actually going to play Traders. But anyway, why are we so interested in reality television? And do you think we're living in a sort of renaissance right now?
I think it is absolutely a renaissance. And when I was on Survivor the first time in 2008, it actually was bad for your career. People would, I knew actors, struggling actors who were on the show who then could not get roles because they had been on Survivor. And now being on a reality show, suddenly you have, 100,000 Instagram followers, you have micro partnerships with brands.
Yeah.
And I just think it's the way that social media has exploded. I mean, obviously reality TV has colonized even our political spheres. But I just think we're like, there's more creativity now too. There's a lot more like streaming platforms. There's a lot more, and reality TV is obviously very cost effective compared to scripted TV. So there's just like a lot of like energy and creativity that goes into it. And we're seeing like some very fun shows, and the culture is celebrating them.
Yeah. And I just a couple more questions for you before we wrap. There's another scene I'd really love to ask you about just because it really stuck out to me. Later in the book, there's a scene where junior staff members are swapping horror stories about the industry and the craziest things people have done to get the shot, to get the edit. A quote I actually wrote down from it is that hardcore or just disgusting? And they don't even know what to make of this kind of work ethic themselves. Can you talk to me about writing that scene and what you really wanted it to do for the reader?
Yeah. I mean, some of that was, just in researching this book, I spoke to, hundreds of contestants and producers and production staff. And I just wanted to include some of the crazier things in that moment, just to give the reader a sense of like, these are the wild things that really do happen, on these shows. Like, they really, like, crazy things do happen. And I think you're right. I hadn't thought about it that way, but just like, they themselves are almost horrified by the work ethic. And there's something interesting about both like contestants and the crew of a reality show where it still like hasn't become a totally formalized, thing of like what this job is. There's still a little bit of like haziness. Like we're just people who should go out into the wilderness and do whatever it takes to catch the most insane footage of people doing crazy things. Like, what a job. And it is kind of like, there's no real structure to it. Like, are you a writer? Are you a producer? Are you, there's so much like nebulousness about it. And I think you're right. Like it's like they themselves don't totally know how to reckon with the things that they themselves are doing.
Yeah. And that's why that scene really stuck out to me, because we get to see, the next generation of producers just still with a little bit of their humanity left. I guess that's really harsh. But like you said, they're reckoning with what they've seen and what they're also discovering, I think, what their own limitations would be.
Honestly, that's a great reading of it. And I truly I wish I would say that was deliberate, but I think you're right that that's subtextually there, like the insanity and the absurdity, and like this younger group kind of seeing how far it can go and trying to process that in real time of like, what are we signing up for, And then later in the book, as things get even crazier, they kind of get on board a little bit. And that I think is just, and that also is something that I wanted to happen for both the contestants and the producers, this sense that this edifice, this machine keeps churning on, right? Like that's like, it keeps like growing and expanding and doing more.
So we're a bookstore, obviously. So I'd love to hear about any of your favorite books, authors, or anyone that influenced your writing process for this book.
I mean, I love Karen Russell so much.
Yes.
I have read and reread Orange World, and the first short story of that book, called The Prospectors, is like, that's my Bible. I just will reread like that just like capture or try to like her energy and the vividness of her writing and the incredible metaphors that she uses and like the amazing imagistic language that she uses as well. Like, she is sort of my go-to. To talk about like past writers, of course, Lord of the Flies, have read and reread, and that's obviously a big influence on this book. And I love that novel. And I feel like that, that novel is fresh, regardless of whether you've, from whatever, you might remember from your school days. I feel like that book is really like vivid and fresh. Nathan Hill is someone who has influenced me tremendously. The Knicks is a favorite of mine because it's like he really is able to like move between registers. He's got like, it's like heartbreaking and sentimental, but it's also hilarious and antic. So that's like one of my favorite books. Severance by Ling Ma, another incredible novel that I love.
Yeah, it's a great one.
There's so many books. I'm trying to think of honestly, Ishiguro is someone who I really, this is, aspire to. I feel like that's even like a big statement to say you aspire to him, because he has these first person narrators who I think are sublime in the way they deceive themselves. And that was someone like I reread and read Remains of the Day, which like I think people remember being really slow and ponderous with Anthony Hopkins, but it's actually a very funny, very short book, and is a lot of fun if you haven't read it recently or at all. So I read and reread that. Like the way that character kind of deludes himself, and then also the way that Ishiguro signposts to the reader that he's deluding himself, like it's so technically complex. Like I have like a Word document like Ishiguro's strategies, like that I tried to like distill some of them and then try to apply it. It's all a work. I'm trying to learn, trying to be better, but he's definitely one of my favorites and my touchstones.
Well, I am very, very excited to get this book into people's hands. I've already given other galleys that I had to other people in my life, so everyone needs to read this book, whether you're a fan of reality television or not. I think there's something in there for everyone. Stephen, thank you so much for doing this today.
That's so kind, and truly, like I am hopeful. I have heard from people who don't love reality TV, or, who aren't fans, that this book like has been interesting because it opens up this world that is a big part of our culture now.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time today, and I'm so grateful. These were amazing questions.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening. Poured Over is a Barnes & Noble production. To help other readers find us, please rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts.